This is update for November 16, 2023, day 631 of the war, and of the date update. This also date catch up for November 14 and 15. I'm going to start with general updates or strategic updates, and I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. So first, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about strategic situation in Ukraine and financing from the US, because it's becoming a big concern. So first of all, most Russian propaganda channels are trying to basically push narrative that Ukraine did not get any help from US because US Parliament passed basically budget, stopgap budget, basically continuation of the existing expenses without sort of real consideration for, I think, till end of January. And obviously Ukraine and Israel, they were not included there for the reason because Republican majority wants to have a separate laws or separate bills for Ukraine and separate for Israel, which actually makes a lot of sense. If you want to have accountability, you want to have everything bucketed or containerized so you can keep track of things and not mix things, commingle things into one big bucket. So from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense, and that's their strategy. However, Russian propaganda channel is trying to say, "Oh, Ukraine didn't get anything," and so on. So the Ukraine funding bill is probably going to be considered sometime early December, maybe even later December, but basically between early December and Christmas, somewhere in that park. This is assuming things sort of go more or less normal the way they go basically right now, and effectively, and the reason why I believe it's going to happen is because effectively Republican Party broke into two pieces, and I don't know if it's a complete sort of separation and breakage of the Republican Party, or this is just sort of temporary issue. I don't know, but basically there is enough support from Democratic Party, and there is, let's say, plus minus half, maybe less than half support from Republican Party, which guarantees that law will pass to fund Ukraine, and obviously the same will happen to law to fund Israel, where actually things are pretty economically not going well, and that this war is taking a heavy toll on Israel economy, which is I don't think it's very, so it's not discussed in the media, but situation is not rosy. Let's put it this way. So this is what's going on with that whole funding story. This is obviously sort of expectation, right? Things can really deteriorate. There is this impeachment fight, and things really can turn ugly in the U.S. One of the sort of signs that things can really get derailed and can turn ugly is the U.S. economic advisor to Ukraine. She basically met with Ukrainian top officials and asked to be prepared to sort of survive in case there is no financial aid from the U.S., which created really, let's say, scare among most of the Ukrainian senior officials because they're simply incapable of doing anything productive. And so therefore, the only way they can see themselves and they can survive is getting basically money from somewhere else. And that's really all ties to why there is a corruption, because corruption is always a symptom of deeper problems. And that corruption is a symptom of low incompetence and inability to figure out how to basically earn money on your own. And I'm speaking about the Ukrainian political top, which in in other words, there is no economic vision. There is no vision how make Ukraine viable economically on its own and military-wise and from all perspectives. There's basically no strategic vision from Ukrainian political top, and they effectively scared that there is no sort of call it free money. They don't know what else to do. Then they are in really bad situation. But as I said, it doesn't look that that's going to happen. But there's a little bit of scare there. Now let's switch to Russia. So in Russia, what's happened? I'm going to talk a little bit about the financial situation there, because in Ukraine, financial situation is complete disaster. I mentioned this many times before. There's really no productive part of the economy, and largely actually thanks to Ukrainian political top, Ukrainian government that's really destroying opportunity for Ukrainian economy to actually exist, to thrive, and to exist and to grow. But let's go to Russia back. So Russian ruble is strengthening. It recently got to 89 Russian rubles for one US dollar. For those who don't follow, this is essentially a pretty quick return from about 100 Russian rubles for one US dollar, or even was like 101, 102 for a brief period of time. And the way it was achieved per direction from the Russian president, who just really wants to have lower, basically more stronger Russian ruble, let's put it this way. The way it was achieved is actually by central bank tightening liquidity in the financial system, in the banking system. So now Russian banks are feeling sort of pinch from shortage of liquidity in the system, and so that's affecting pretty much demand for import, for buying, basically for importing goods from abroad, and so that's basically destroys demand for US dollar. And there's, I mentioned before, there is artificial increase in the supply of US dollars by forcing exporters to sell essentially all of their US dollars or euros, whatever they earn, inside of Russia. So effectively, they use this sort of two administrative measures to basically paint the picture, rosier picture than what it is really. But for now, for short term, for short while, it will work. However, the results are sort of showing up. There is in October there was drastic drop in import by $2 billion versus September, and then export was down as well. But it was export was down to 37 billion versus 40 in September. So basically, both export and import were going down, but however, still Russia still maintains positive difference between export and import, which is kind of what you probably need to have if you want to finance war and so on. So then at the same time, Russian external trade dropped by 16% January through September. So as you can see, I mentioned October numbers, so the trend basically continues. So and this is a general trend where this global economy is essentially disintegrating pretty quickly. The same is happening in European Union, The same is happening in China. Basically, all major trade partners are basically erecting walls and essentially separating. And this is this is actually very similar to what's been going on during the Great Depression time, except and that time that was, I think, U.S. Parliament that erected tariffs on import of various goods that really put world trade into very difficult situation in many countries as well. So this is obviously history never repeats, but it rhymes, and this is in many ways the history is rhyming. Um, So, and Russia just one example of that happening. At the same time, the actual situation and sort of life for the average Russian is deteriorating from a perspective of what you can buy, like basically goods that you can get. And so, for example, the price for eggs went up by 21%, and there is and the Russian president decided to micromanage economy and directed the government authorities to investigate, specifically anti-monopoly authority, to investigate why this is happening. They obviously will investigate. They will not, make more eggs. So things will continue deteriorating, and the reason for that is very simple: is because the resources are being found into military production. Basically, it's this dilemma, or I would say not dilemma, but sort of how much you spend on butter versus how much you spend on cannons. And right now, preference is to spend more on cannons. So as a result, you have less butter. In this case, eggs, and similar situation. I think I mentioned chicken meat. Sort of this thing started to pop up everywhere, and as war continues, the more and more of this sort of problems in the food supply and general supply of everything, consumer goods, basically, will emerge more and more. There will be shortages and things of that nature. And just for the reference, just for those who are interested in in how much average Russian earns, or Russian pensioner or retiree, the average pension is 3,000 Russian rubles. So roughly, it's, let's say, $300, a little bit more than $300 if you calculate using 89. So it's roughly 330 US dollars per month. That's how much a Russian pensioner gets. This is after taxes. So this is your net disposable income. And then there's another interesting twist to what's going on in Russian economy. Russian railroads are now going to be using prisoners as workers. So basically, they're going to get free labor essentially. And this is actually a general trend in Russia, sort of like heavy industry or mining operation. There's a lot of talk about using basically free labor. So this is all a sign of war economy, the economy that's really turning into basically one big labor camp, or gulag, which was more relevant for former Soviet Union. And this is actually what's been going on in the world during World War II in Soviet Union, and then in Germany as well. Related to all of this, the Secretary of the Security Council, Patrushev, met with heads of the various Russian regions, and told them to prepare for the mobilization of the economy. Basically, prepare for the war economy, so that from what I discussed, basically this is going to get into more overdrive essentially. So again, this goes to this whole story that Russia is willing to, back out and have a sort of sign peace or whatever. There is no such plan, and there's very clear desire to sort of to finish the war by conquering entire of Ukraine. Also related to all of this, now Russian teenagers or pupils in the senior senior grades in the school. So I think it's like from age like 15 through 18 will go through basically military training. So it's going to be as like your class, like you have your subjects, and one of the subjects will be military training, where you go through all aspects, including learning how to shoot, how to fight, like basically it's like school is preparing soldiers effectively. This was actually also in the Soviet Union. Soviet Union had the same sort of system where the teenagers, or whatever you call them, basically, I don't know, you can call them children, but basically teenagers from 15 till 18, they would go through military training, basically. And then the final piece, there was a final budget was approved by Russian parliament, where they're going to spend on army 10.8 trillion Russian rubles, which is roughly 30% of the state budget. I mentioned before 40% number that includes apparently also police, military police, all other sort of brute force organizations of the government, let's put it this way. Just to give you perspective of how the expenses are going up on Russian army. So in 2021, before the war, it was 3.5 trillion. In 2022, it was already 4.7 trillion. In 23, it's 6.8 trillion, and in 24, it's going to be 10.8 trillion. So as you can see, it roughly went up almost 3 times. Not almost, it's actually 3 times since 2021. So there is no, I would say, peace coming anytime soon, basically. Now let's switch to the walkthrough the front line in Ukraine. I'm gonna do it in a clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border remains more or less the same. Typical activity, but nothing really strategically important. Now let's move to the North Luhansk front line. Things here were relatively quiet. There's Russian pressure here northeast of Kupiansk. The Russian troops continuing their attacks. So far it's all tactical, and pressure continues. But so far Ukrainian forces are holding on. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Northern sector is fairly quiet. The southern is the initiative is clearly in Russian hands. Russian troops, as you can see, attacking in the places where they lost ground. All tactical level attacks, putting quite a bit of pressure on Ukrainian forces, because there's sort of fresh blood, quite a bit of new resources here, and except they are not being used in sort of concentrated large-scale manner. It's all they're still being used in a tactical fashion, but there's a good amount of resources behind the sort of main battle line on the Russian side here. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Things here are more or less the same without huge changes. Russian pressure around Avdiyivka without any significant advances. Maybe there is somewhere it's like 50-100 meters forward, but essentially there is no real change, meaningful change in the situation here. So far, Ukrainian troops are holding on. For how long, it's unclear. If Russian side will continue this pressure for long enough, eventually they probably will be able to capture Avdiyivka. So in other words, the solution here is not to be in this rigid defense, but you really need to counterattack and not just straight against the Russian troops. It basically requires sort of creativity, thinking, and actually training of the troops, which is non-existent on the Ukrainian side. So we'll see if there is enough resources on the Russian side to continue this pressure for some time, and basically to force the hand of Ukrainian side. Then there were attacks against Marinka, which sort of never end without any success there. So this is the situation, development of situation around Avdiyivka. Essentially, it's effectively without meaningful changes since November 4. As you can see, the main sort of result for the Russian side is that they have this bridgehead on the other side of railroad, which creates opportunity to continue attacks. But that's pretty much it. Now let's move to the Zaporizhya front line. Things here somewhat quieter. Russian small-scale tactical attacks in the areas where they lost ground, near Robotine and then near Rozhaine, without basically much success here. And then let's check the situation along the Dnipro River. Things here quiet, basically quiet in the sense that Russian side is not able to destroy the Ukrainian bridgeheads, and Ukrainian command is not sort of capable of organizing a breakout from those bridgeheads in a meaningful way. So it's basically status quo remains, and again, this proves the whole idea that Ukrainian command is not capable of organizing successful offensives, as well as troops are lacking. They're not prepared for that as well. So it's a problem at every single level. It's a sort of pervasive situation, and this cannot be changed quickly or somehow by changing, the general XYZ for general ABC. It's much deeper problem that Ukrainian army is facing, and to be fair, Russian army in the same situation. As I said, this is reflection of this not even Soviet armies. It's basically two peasant armies fighting each other, and that's where the whole sort of problem is. As a summary, I would say that at this point, the initiative is definitely in the hands of the Russian command. They sort of pick and choose where they want to put pressure. So far, their pressure was not successful in a meaningful way, but they can. The point is that they can choose the point where they want to put pressure, and that's reflective that they have enough resources right now on the front line in terms of number of soldiers, versus before it was shortage. Now it's enough. It's not sort of large number, as I mentioned. It's somewhere closer to 600,000, which is somewhat similar to Ukrainian forces, so close enough, and that's creating parity where Russian side can basically attempt to do, I wouldn't say strategic offensive, but really tactical pressure on Ukrainian side. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.